and observers, it's good to see you all here and engaged in the activity, but just a couple reminders as we proceed through the session to please keep your audio and visual off as to not interrupt the session or distract the competitors. Normally in an in-person session, that would the responsibilities of an observer are obviously more, but just please do your best not to impact the session in any way. That's all I ask. So we're still missing this last person. I'm gonna text the name to Tab, as I believe the protocol.
Alex, this is PJ Samorian. There actually is a button over to the right. I don't know if you have it, where you can communicate with Tab, and one of them says missing person.
On
PJ, is that on Tab Room or on Zoom?
On Zoom.
oh, I'm on the app, so that might.
Oh, that might make a difference.
Let me go to the proper.
There was a button over to the right that I noticed that says missing person. And I believe if you click on that, it'll directly go to the tab room, and then they can be like, oh, this person never checked in or never registered.
I see that. Okay, I'll do that now. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Mr. Washer, I think you might be in the wrong room. If you can hear me. Mr. Washer?
Could all of the participants in Chamber 2 please turn on your camera, just so I can make sure that everybody is working? Participant Soham, so far I don't see.
Okay.
Have they been on at all?
No, I don't believe so.
All right, thanks. Otherwise, you have everybody that you are supposed to have.
Great. Should I wait for Soham or should we
let's give him like another 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then it also seems that there's someone in here, Judge Mike Washer, who hasn't, I've tried to ask if he's here and he isn't, because I think he's in the wrong room, is my point. So I don't know if I should just remove him.
I removed them so that
Okay.
they can come ask us what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
All right, so we'll give that 2 minutes or so and then proceed.
So are there 10 participants?
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
We'll go at 11:19. I think that's fair. And then if Soham comes, he'll just join. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Gordon. I'll be your parliamentarian for all of today and all of tomorrow. I competed in congressional debate for 4 years in high school. I'm now a second year in college, and I'm looking forward to a great session. I know there's a lot going on in the world, and so I'm wishing all of you, all of your families, your community well, but that hopefully today's session and the rest of the tournament can be a nice way for us all to connect with each other, to enjoy debate, to enjoy our debate community. And so a genuine sense of gratitude to you all, to our judges, to our observers, and the TAB team for the Tournament of Champions to make this possible for us to all be here today. And so would our judges mind introducing themselves for the students?
Sure. Hi, I'm RJ Peliciata. I'm a coach at Cary Academy in North Carolina. Really pleased to be here today. I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. I've judged the morning hour twice before. I really enjoy it. My advice to you would be just to be cognizant, listen to other people. Questioning is really important in this session, and I'll definitely be weighing that very heavily as well. So do your best, and good luck to everyone. I'm glad to be here.
And Ms. France?
Hi, I'm Glenda France. I'm with Lafayette High School. I've judged lots of tournaments, even the nationals last year. I'm glad to be here. I'm looking for defense and substance and know what you're talking about and improve it. And I really like doing this. It's great. I'm a mining engineer for the state, so this is really something different, and I've really enjoyed the year, and I look forward to it. Just be relaxed and enjoy it. Let's have fun.
All right, wonderful. And Senator Gupta, I see you joined us. Wonderful. The only thing is I'm asking that everyone use a placard in order to indicate their preference, their desire to give a speech or ask a question. In terms of procedures, just to briefly go over, this is for the morning hour session. I'll just say speakers rise. At that point, please show your placard on the screen and I'll randomly select one of you. For time signals, one finger is one gavel. So at 2 minutes, I'll give one finger. At 2 minutes and 30 seconds, I'll give 2 fingers. 2 minutes and 55 will be 3. And then at 3:05, I'll start counting down backwards at 3:05, 4 seconds left, 3 seconds left, 2 seconds left, 1 second left, and then at 3:10, you'll receive a fist. And then at that point, I'll ask you to please conclude your speech. You should not be abusing the grace period. The judges have been asked to take that into account when evaluating you. And then in terms of the questioning blocks, each person will have 4 30-second direct question blocks. All same thing, hold your placard indicating you wish to ask a question. At 20 seconds, I'll give you a hand. And then at 30 seconds, I'll give you a fist. And then we'll move on directly to the next person. Are there any questions about my procedures? All right, wonderful. I'm looking forward to a great day. Without further ado, I now invite the first speaker to the floor. All speakers, please rise. Senator Pontes, you have the floor.
Thank you. This is Senator Pontes. I'm speaking for the first time today, of course. Just give me a thumbs up when you're ready. And also let me know if you can't hear me.
Can you show your placard again, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Everything's bigger in Texas. Our barbecues, our love for food, and definitely our portion sizes. That's why it's particularly heartbreaking to see our restaurants closing their doors forever. Families crushed, wages lost, lives destroyed. Coronavirus is infecting more than just people. It's infecting our culture, our economy. Congress, I call you to action. First, we have to understand that we've completely neglected our small restaurants. Emily Flitter from the New York Times on April 14th of 2020 tells us that food services received less than 10% of Trump's CARE Act. Now that sounds like a lot, but Brookings on April 2nd of 2020 clarifies that for an industry that boasts of being the second most common occupation in the United States, employing over 12 million people, 10% is almost insulting. Not only has our Congress ignored the needs of restaurants, we've created large barriers to using that aid. The Washington Post on April 7th of 2020 tells us that loans come with stipulations that mandate that companies have to pay employees for over 2 months until they can seek loan forgiveness. With little to no money coming in and very little in the bank, small businesses are afraid to even seek out these loans. And to top it off, the money from the CARES Act has now run out. Congress, this is our chance to do better. But second, we have to understand that these restaurants have deep cultural implications. The Houston Chronicle on March 29th of 2020 tells us that 1 out of every 50 restaurants in Texas has gone out of business since the start of March, and 12% more will permanently close their doors within the next month. Houston, Texas is the most diverse city in America. It's reflected in our many cuisines, like the Mahatma Gandhi District, Chinatown, Korean fare in Spring Branch, Vietnamese dining in Midtown, Venezuelan food in Katy, you name it, we have it. The National Restaurant Association found in 2016 that ethnic restaurants don't just promote culinary diversity. They employ huge immigrant communities, higher than any other industry in the United States. These restaurants are more than just stores. They're snippets of countries, identity, culture, and they're fighting for closure. Texas chili and barbecue are great for a few weeks, but we need more. Senators from New York to California, your restaurants are multicultural enclaves representing years of history, and your people are counting on you to preserve them.
Thank you, Senator, for a speech time of 3 minutes and 3 seconds. All questioners, please hold up your placard. We'll start with Ivy and then Khan.
Representative, if those businesses are as struggling as you say that they are, why won't they reach out for the debt forgiveness?
Okay, so the debt forgiveness comes with a lot of stipulations. So 75% of the money they give has to go to payroll. That means only 25% can cover the rent that they have to pay, which is enormous in some restaurants. And then they also have to employ all of the restaurants that they employed before coronavirus. And they have to remain the same compensation. The loan isn't enough.
Okay, because of the other stimulus checks going off, can't the personal level of the stimulus also help out the business side of it?
Hi, Representative. So
Hi.
you make the assumption that these small businesses aren't getting enough money. How much money are they getting under this CARE Act right now?
Under the CARE Act, they get enough to essentially try to manage their business.
I'm trying to find on what basis, you're saying they're not getting enough money. Because as far as I'm concerned, they're getting small business loans and they're getting enough aid from this package. So what evidence tells you
these small businesses are getting a small amount of money? First of all, it's not enough to pay their employees, and second of all, it's not enough to pay for rent.
Thank you, Senator Khan. There's still 2 more question blocks available.
Sure, I'll take it. I'll take one.
Senator Earlbeck, you're first.
Why do these small businesses receive less funding than other ones? Why did Trump choose to allocate this way?
Because Trump hosted a meeting a couple weeks ago that only included large companies, large restaurants in the meeting. He's not taking into account the small businesses in his policy, nor in his conversations about actually getting money to these businesses.
Right, but small businesses obviously have less workers. Isn't that the reason why they have less funding than big businesses?
Absolutely not, because they make up huge portions of the American economy and employing tons of American people. Allocating them 10% is almost insulting because it's definitely not enough for them to keep going.
Thank you, Kaiser.
Hi, Representative. So in these times of crisis, isn't it important to weigh lives over culture?
Of course, but you have to understand that not giving small restaurants especially enough money is hurting a large amount of lives. First of all, you're hurting those workers.
Keeping that in mind, when we give more money to large corporations, aren't they keeping more people employed, which is a net benefit?
Not necessarily, because in my speech, I told you that these restaurants actually they're the second most common occupation in the US. So when you provide small businesses money, you're providing huge amounts of people money, and you're affecting the farmers' supply chain and the people.
Thank you, Senator Pontes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that speech. To amend how we should do the questioning period, we have to take everything playing it by ear. So I'll call initially for questioners to hold up their placard. So if there are 4 for me to select at the beginning, I will. But let's say there are 2 in this case, or 3 or 1 or whatever, then during that questioning period, if you subsequently decide that you do want to ask a question, just hold up your placard and I'll use the chat function to let you know who is next. Okay? So hopefully that works. And I think it would be easier, instead of at 20, to do it 25 and just count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then give a fist at 30. Okay? Sounds good. Thanks for bearing with me. All speakers, please rise. Senator Khan, you have the floor.
Thank you. Can I have any indication of when my judges are ready? Good. Don't have gallery mode on. Parley, are my judges ready?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Since the wake of the pandemic, Google searches for good news have jumped 5-fold. And while there have been plenty of positive social-based stories, the most promising national event has been a continuous decrease in air pollution, allowing for significantly cleaner air. The connection is clear. If our country can survive this pandemic, we can also survive without the fossil fuel industry. First off, let's be real. Fossil fuels are destroying the environment. The United States Energy Information Administration tells us that the burning of fossil fuels were responsible for 76% of United States greenhouse gas emissions in 2016. Yet even with this information, this Congress continues to give $20.5 billion a year to fund fossil fuel subsidies. I'd like to say this speech is based solely on discrediting the fossil fuel industry. But to provide a solution, you need to have all the problems identified. So, to be clear, the fossil fuel industry's impacts stop when this Congress does. In an ironic sense of good news, our economic state may help aid the decline of the industry. The reasoning to keep fossil fuel subsidies starts to break down once the fossil fuel industry is already in a recession. Why waste money to prop up a dying industry when we can use this opportunity to invest in technology of the future, renewables? Therefore, the time could not be more perfect to support legislation that shifts subsidies targeting fossil fuels to renewable energies. As explained by the Union of Concerned Scientists in 2018, that the cost of renewable energy is competitive with fossil fuels, but many investors still don't invest in renewables. In the status quo, for people to use renewable energies, people must pay upfront costs near $2,000 just for the cost of installing something like a solar panel in their home. Because seeing the payoff of renewable energies takes way too long, investors put their money into fossil fuels instead. But without subsidies in fossil fuels and additional subsidies in renewables, investors will be incentivized to put their money in renewable technologies. But why do these investments matter? Because investments in green technology allow for that technology to improve and become more sustainable, so that ultimately our country's electrical grid could work entirely on renewables. The final stat that I leave you with is from the International Institute for Sustainable Development in August 2019. If just 10% of the annual fossil fuel subsidies were given to the renewable energy sector, our world could see a reduction of fossil fuel emissions by nearly 20%. People shouldn't have to Google good news to find it. If you support my plan for renewable energy, it will be clear, quality-based, and right in front of our eyes. Oh, I think
I'm sorry, I messed up the timing on it. I have you at about 2:55. My apologies. I'll do better next time. All questioners, please rise. We'll start with Mayor.
Hi, Representative. So you want to cut some of these subsidies that are currently going to fossil fuel companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So in the status quo, credit for clean coal investment, IRS code 48A and 48B subsidies create a series of tax credits for energy investments and for renewable energy. Why would you want to cut these as well?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm advocating for cutting the current fossil fuel subsidies and shifting the ones that are on fossil fuels, it may be slowly, to renewable energies. So no, I'm not advocating for a cut of all subsidies, but it's just these ones on fossil fuels. And my advocacy is that the timing is right.
But it's the same sort of companies that are currently investing in fossil fuels.
Hi, Senator. How many people are employed by the fossil fuel industry?
I can't give an exact number.
Quite a few, though, right? Okay. Are people losing their jobs because of COVID-19?
Yes.
So is it really fair for us to take away subsidies from the industry when people are already losing their jobs and even cast them into a further cycle of unemployment?
Here's the thing. We have lots of severance packages. We have lots of care that's implemented in this new bill that was actually talked about by the previous representative. And the thing is, when we can shift to renewable energy...
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Senator Patterson.
So what makes now the right time to try and implement this?
All right. So as I outlined at the beginning of my speech, that the fossil fuel industry and mainly the arguments that support the subsidies are the fact that the fossil fuel industry can't take like a sudden decline and it can't take a recession and it would be bad for our economy. The thing is, if we're already in the midst of this session, the timing is perfect to try to switch our subsidies and correct our policy.
What if this backfires on us? What if what we're planning for the solar energy, what if that doesn't work?
I mean, I would say that you also create jobs at the same time.
Hi, Representative. Okay, so you talk about how the timing is perfect right now, but how is it perfect right now if we'd be completely leaving out everyone who's already struggling, like Mr. Jawar brought up?
Here's the thing. When you move renewable energy subsidies, when you create renewable energy subsidies in place of those
but why can't we wait until the industry has recovered a little and then slowly slowly switch to renewables instead of in a time of crisis?
Right, you slowly switch to renewable energies and subsidies because
Thank
the
you,
fact
Senator
is,
Khan. Thank you, Senator Khan. There are some new observers in the room that I need to ask to rename themselves to indicate that you're an observer. The name on it is James B. Conant, James Cox, and then W.B. Ray. If you don't change your name, I'm going to have to remove you from the room. Okay. All speakers, please rise. We'll go with Parthiban.
Good morning. This is Senator Parthiban. Are all my judges ready? Just give me a thumbs up. Okay, I see 1, 2. Is anyone not ready? All right.
One of the judges is not ready.
All right, thank you. Up and down the state of New Jersey, from the shore to the Delaware River, from the Pine Barrens to the Skylands, and to the cities in our suburbs, I've campaigned for this Senate on one principle, that I have the backs of my citizens, as education is our most guiding principle for our success. It's about time that we change the way we approach students and educational institutions to dictate success in their future. First, let's understand the problem. Right now, New Jersey uses massive amounts of funding to improve test scores for students instead of making them more well-rounded. In fact, the New Jersey Annual Government Report explains in December of 2018 that the state spent $17,000 per student, and 67% of that funding went to improve access for standardized testing. But why is that so harmful? Now schools and the government continually fund students to learn their tests, meaning that it increases revenue counts for schools rather than improving their ability to learn basic skills. As a result, schools try to seek that funding any way possible, even if it impairs basic moral guidelines. In fact, the Economic Policy Institute explains in December of 2019 that 30% of educational institutions in New Jersey cut funding to special classes by cheating on these tests, scandalizing government testing programs. These schools condone acts of dishonesty at the expense of their own nobility. But what does this mean for students in the future? The New York Times explains on April 24th of 2019 that 79% of teachers in minority districts in New Jersey selectively pick students to move grades based on standardized testing scores and higher grades rather than assessing them holistically. It's not only my state. Nationally, we have continued to allow this disparity, using kids for the benefit of institutions instead of giving them the success they deserve. We cannot stand for the support of dishonesty and partiality to 74 million students who continue to become suppressed in a nation filled with opportunity. But now, let's look at how to solve this problem. The only way to make sure that institutions don't employ malpractice is through stronger regulatory measures, specifically ensuring that funding given to them is diversified into a variety of programs. A UPenn meta-analysis explains in April 2018 that through consistent regulation in state standards, it increases diversification into other programs by 65% that interest students rather than follow the school's interests. Throughout the country, as we move to regulate schools, we give them the opportunity to students to become more well-rounded. But even more than that, we can prevent bad practices. Princeton University explains in June of 2018 that regulation that over schools that try to bypass state regulation will be fined 25% of their funding, decreasing profit-oriented initiatives by 72%. This means that millions of families will be able to trust school organizations and highly equip them for the future. With these measures, we can fundamentally change the status quo to represent the prosperity of our students.
Speech time of 3 minutes and 9 seconds. All questioners, please rise. We'll start with Earlbeck.
Hello.
Hi, so how often do schools actually condone their students to cheat?
Very often, actually. In New Jersey, that number has gone over 15%, which means that in around 500 schools, over 50 of those schools cheat, meaning that they lose the value of standardized testing.
Okay, so can you give me an exact regulatory step that we can take to improve oversight to stop this?
So the main regulatory step that has been implemented over the last 10 years is by fining schools. By fining schools, they aren't able to get the same amount of money, meaning that through whatever we give them.
Thank you, Senator Patterson.
Hello. So you were just talking about fining schools, correct? All right. Do schools have the ability to be fined and then still continue business as normal?
Yes, because the state of New Jersey gives a lot of funding, almost $17,000 per student, they have the ability to be fined and still be okay in the future.
But like other schools, do all schools have the ability to do this?
Yes, because we supply a massive amount of funding.
All right, thank you.
Kaiser.
Hi, Representative. So now let's talk about Title I, Title IV schools that depend on federal funding. When we find them, what's going to happen to their students?
Well, we're going to decrease the amount of profit-oriented initiatives, which means that they're more likely to be diversified into multiple programs.
Okay, but when we cut their federal funding, aren't we also cutting the quality of their education?
Not necessarily.
Because if we are, then that would incentivize them to cheat even more. Wouldn't you agree?
A lot of funding. We can now move the funding that they have remaining to other programs.
Thank you, Senator Karp.
Hello.
Okay, so bouncing off of Senator Patterson's question, do you think a lot of schools across the United States condone cheating?
Yes.
And not just in New Jersey?
It's not only in New Jersey, like consistently over the past like 10 years.
Okay, so let's say even if they do all schools receive the same amount of funding? Because I know specifically in my district that they don't, especially for schools in low income districts.
Sure, but at least in most cases where schools receive a lot of amount of
Thank you, Senator. You may be seated, or virtually seated. All speakers, please rise. We'll go with Patterson.
All right, thank you. Just when all my judges are ready, can they please give me a nice big thumbs up? Thank you. Sexual trafficking sounds like something that would come out of a nation in Asia or Africa. It does not sound like an American problem. However, as the FBI reported in 2019, over 2,304 children were rescued from sexual trafficking rings across the nation. This is a problem that hits every single American citizen, including the constituents in my hometown in Ohio, where down the street in the mall, there is a sexual trafficking ring that was just busted 3 weeks ago, leading to 500 children being rescued. This is an American problem. Therefore, we need to solve it. Now, firstly, we need to address the lack of numbers surrounding human trafficking within the United States. The Federal Bureau of Investigation estimates roughly 293,000 American youth are at risk of becoming victims of sexual trafficking. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children estimates that 1 in 7 of the runaways reported were likely victims of sexual trafficking. And here's the worst part. Those numbers are the lowball estimates. There is no real way to estimate how many victims are out there. And that's because our Congress has not been trying hard enough to actually look for it. Right now, the Federal Bureau of Investigation says that we have been cutting funding to efforts trying to solve the human trafficking crisis. Rather, instead of actually trying to make sure we find how many victims are out there and give them the support we need, we cut funding for other endeavors. That needs to stop, and we need to fix that. Secondly, our inability to distinguish prostitution from trafficking. According to the American Center for Progress, in many jurisdictions, the means are which people are arrested for prostitution, prosecuted, and locked up in jails and juvenile facilities leads many traffickers that oftentimes take back their victims because they have nowhere else to go. Instead of actually giving victims help, instead we just leave them with a criminal record and put them back with their traffickers, oftentimes leading to a system where kids go on and on and on and never get out. That needs to change. We need to change how our laws work around prostitution and trafficking and make sure that there is a distinct difference. Lastly, the United States oftentimes ignores the buyers of sexual trafficking. Let's look at Missouri, for example. It is a Class A misdemeanor for someone to patronize a prostitute who's between the ages of 14 and 18 years of age, which carries a maximum penalty of 1 year in jail. However, it is a Class C felony, which carries a maximum penalty of 7 years in federal prison to have sexual intercourse with someone who's under the age of 17, when a perpetrator is over the age of 21. Flatly, the lines and laws across the nation just don't match up. The punishments for sexual trafficking and for buying it are just not harsh enough. And at the end of the day, there's no consistency. What the United States needs to do is make sure we have the correct numbers surrounding human trafficking so we can get as many victims out of the practice as possible. We need to make sure that there is a distinction between prostitution and trafficking. And lastly, we need to make sure that the laws are fair so that all people who are in this process are punished.
Thank you, Senator, for a speech of 3 minutes and 9 seconds. All questioners, please rise. We'll start with Ivy.
Thank you. I agree that more funding is the answer, but by how much and where should we direct this funding to?
All right, so as I pointed out in my first contention, we need to put more resources into the Federal Bureau of Investigation because that's where the most amount of victims are currently being rescued from. What?
But specifically, what policy can we pass to achieve the change that you want?
It's something I mentioned in my third point. We need to change the laws around how we actually prosecute victims of sexual trafficking.
Thank you,
because
Senator
right now they're being
Bartlett.
treated as prostitutes.
Hi, so if the FBI has been working for years to end trafficking, but they've made minimal impact, how do you expect us to make change and save these victims?
Well, the reason they're making minimal impact is because we keep cutting their funding and their resources. It's
Right,
hard
how
for them
much
to
funding
actually
do they have in the status quo? How much funding do they have in the status quo?
Right now in the status quo, I don't have a direct number, but their funding has been
Then
cut
how can you say
directly
they don't have enough funds to halt trafficking? If they've made minimal impact and you can't give me...
Because during a 10-year period when their funding is being substantially cut over
Thank
year
you,
by
Senator
year,
Kaiser.
they're not going to be.
Hi, Representative. In your speech, are you accounting for the amount of red tape that's involved with the FBI?
All right, so regardless of the amount of red tape that's involved with the FBI and all the other organizations who are trying to stop red trafficking, the problem is that we're just not giving them the amount of resources that are necessary to actually
Is it possible
do anything.
that maybe they're able to catch these criminals but not prosecute them?
That has to do something with the laws I was talking about. The laws just aren't able to prosecute people who are buying.
By the time we change the laws and
Right.
add more funding, aren't people just going to continue to be trafficked?
Regardless, we
Thank
gotta
you,
make sure that
Senator
we
Patterson.
actually.
There's one more questioning block available, but seeing no questioners. Oh, Senator Pontes.
Hi, Senator. So Congress has sustained funding for a while to combat sex trafficking in the US, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so just last year they allocated over $100 million towards sex trafficking. The things you're talking about reducing, when do they reduce funds? Like, what's the reason behind it?
All right, so they reduce funds to certain organizations because they believe they don't do a good enough job.
Well, sure, they may do that, but the main reason they reduce funds is because there's something more urgent, like coronavirus or immigration. Don't you agree that's ethical?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. You may be seated. All speakers, please rise. Senator Mayer.
I think the chair. That's Senator Mayer, spelled M-A-H-E-R. Just love a smile or nod from any of my judges when you're ready, and I'm always at your leisure. Great, great. Just waiting for one. Awesome, thank you. In March of 2019, 16-year-old Jackson Chicas was gruesomely murdered in my home district of Fairfax County, Virginia. Jackson was a student at a local public school at which I'd spent hours working and volunteering at. Many of the students, familiar faces, and friends. But what most of us didn't know about Jackson was that in his birthplace of El Salvador, he'd been forced to join MS-13, one of the largest and most violent gangs in the world, forcing him and his family to flee the nation. But even once within the borders of our nation, he couldn't escape the gang's grip and fell victim once again. Just 7 miles from the Capitol building at which this Congress meets, my district has recently witnessed an unprecedented resurgence of MS-13. They terrorize communities by conducting vicious killings, recruiting middle schoolers, and selling dozens of young girls into prostitution, catalyzing the very problem that Representative Patterson just told you about. But the crisis of violent gangs preying on constituents in my state is only a microcosm of the burgeoning problem of gang violence in our nation. January 2020 data from the Department of Justice estimates that today some 33,000 violent gangs are criminally active in the US, accounting for 13% of deaths. Similarly to MS-13 in Virginia, gang networks evolve into flourishing criminal enterprises that strike at the heart of our most vulnerable constituents, immigrants, especially those who are undocumented. The Economist writes on August 3rd of 2017 that gangs commonly target undocumented immigrants because they know they may hesitate to report crimes due to fear of deportation, meaning that in many cases, the very individuals who flee to our nation seeking protection from this gang violence only continue to be threatened and extorted by the same gangs once they arrive. Despite this, gang violence has become an afterthought for policymakers. And while this Congress has wasted $50 billion studying the mating calls of Panamese frogs and the Pakistani film industry, since 2015, we've passed a grand total of 2 bills pertaining to violence in communities and decimated the spending of anti-gang task forces. But the best solution to gang violence is mitigating recruitment of at-risk groups by providing financial alternatives to crime through job programs. A study by the University of Michigan's Youth Violence Prevention Center in March of 2013 found that providing employment opportunities to youth at risk of becoming involved in gang violence quantifiably decreased gang-related criminal activity and recruitment. But more generally, it's time we pass legislation to ease off restrictions that prevent immigrants from safely reporting crime due to fear of deportation. This Congress is renowned for pork barrel spending, but without significant change, our most vulnerable constituents will fall victim to the barrels of shotguns and assault rifles.
Speech time of 2 minutes and 59 seconds. All questioners, please rise. Ivy.
Do you have an estimate for how much eradicating a gang like M13 would cost the American taxpayer?
Oh, it varies depending on the different types of states. That's why I'm saying that it's so harmful when we've
What do you mean by
decimated
different
budgets of these
types of
anti-gang
states?
task forces. I'm sorry?
What are the different types of states?
The different types of states, I mean, different states have different kinds of budgets and things like that. That's why the best cost is by preventing recruitment altogether, by stopping it from the ground level.
Yeah, so on the federal level, how much of an investment would this take to implement the policy that you speak of?
I'm saying we would be funneling money to different states with varying needs at different costs to fund these job programs.
And where would the money be funneling from?
Thank you, Patterson.
All right, to bounce off of Senator Ivy's question, where's the money coming from?
I mean, I gave you examples in my speech, 2 different examples of how we've wasted $50 billion in the past 2 years studying things that are utterly irrelevant. I believe that the safety of my constituents comes paramount to any other needs. And that's why I'm so proud to talk about these different solutions, because I believe that funding money into these job programs and into state governments and rejuvenating our nation's anti-gang task forces is going to be an effective.
How do these gangs exactly get power? What makes
Thank you,
them
Senator
power?
Khan.
Hi, Representative. So in your stating of problems, you talk a lot about how it targets specific communities. Why isn't this something that should be addressed by state legislature rather than being addressed by this Congress
Right.
that oversees?
So 2 things. First, many state budgets don't really take into account the idea of undocumented immigrants, which is why we need federal laws ensuring their protection, because we can't leave it up to different states.
Like a law like in your home state of Virginia, like Representative Comstock's law for Virginia state legislator that focused specifically on MS-13. Why can't that work specifically for that community like it has been?
Because I'm telling you that while that's just for one state, we need federal national change.
Thank you, Senator Jawar.
Hi, Senator. Why do most people join gangs in the first place?
There's a variety of different reasons, but a lot of times for youth and undocumented immigrants, they seek protection, they seek security, and they seek power of different forms.
For sure, protection. So how can we ensure that gang violence does not continue to proliferate without actually ensuring that these youth are protected in the first place?
That's why I'm telling you that when you provide a financial incentive for them to not be able to go into a gang.
Yeah, but money is money. That doesn't protect you from other people's guns. How can we make sure that these individuals are protected in their neighborhoods?
What you do is incentivize the funnel money into these anti-gang violence task forces.
Thank you, Senator Mayer.
I think the chair.
Yep. All speakers, please rise. Senator Jawar.
Thank you. For the judge's reference, that's Jawar. It's spelled Jhawar. I think my placard is backwards, but if you can get it from there. If I could just get a smaller nod when y'all are ready. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Alon Seagraves. For 2 years, he was my soccer coach at Kennedy High School. But if you Google his name, you'll find something very different. He lived a double life as the coach of a varsity soccer team by day and a cruel human trafficker by night. On December 26, 2017, those lives collided. I woke up to find article after article, ranging from KCRA3 Sacramento to the New York Times, detailing his arrest and detainment for the sexual trafficking of 5 young women. Sadly, I can't say I was shocked. Alon was a cruel, strange person. I always felt like he was hiding something. What did surprise me is what I learned after doing a bit more research. In October 2013, the Human Rights Society ranked Sacramento, my city and hometown, as the 2nd worst in America in regards to human trafficking. I always knew our country had a national problem, but I never knew it was so concentrated in my own backyard. According to Melissa Herman, director of the Sacramento Courage House, from 2012 to 2016, over 400 children in Sacramento suffered from the vital criminals. And that's just how many were saved. Sacramento's location makes it a prime destination for traffickers because almost every major California freeway meets in my city. It's easy to transport victims, meet buyers, and run away from crimes, making it extremely attractive to criminals. Now, Senator Patterson, I agree that we should reinstate funding to the FBI, but I'd be complacent if I said that doing only this is any type of solution to the problem. I agree with Senator Earlbeck. We need to do a lot more than just increase resources. As the California Department of Justice wrote in 2012, the #1 factor slowing us down is a lack of comprehensive data on the problem. But with more collaboration across local, state, and federal levels, we can all work together to be a step ahead of human traffickers and prevent victims from falling into their trap. A lack of data severely hurts us in Sacramento, but it's a problem in every other city across America, meaning that Senator Parthiban and Senator Pontes, this affects you too. Today, I'm proposing that we create a national database on human trafficking. Chelsea Parsons from the Center for American Progress explains on April 8th of 2014 that a system like that is the first step to targeting the issue. We can make federal guides on supporting victims, record data on what locations are hotspots, and analyze the key words and phrases that law enforcement needs to look out for. Most importantly, we can create accurate estimates about the extent of the issue and send out federal help to the areas that need us. A national database cements that this Congress sees trafficking as a national issue. My community is being tormented by criminals stealing our children and selling their bodies. But I know Sacramento parents aren't the only ones crying. Don't let this be another speech that's forgotten when we close this meeting. Remember the story of Alon Seagraves and take action for my community and for yours
Senator
too.
Jawar. Thank you, Senator Jawar. Speech time of 3 minutes and 15 seconds. All questioners, please rise. We'll start with Parthiban.
Hi, Senator Jawar.
Hi.
So why can't traffickers bankroll local and state police institutions?
Could you repeat that question? I didn't hear the first part.
So why can't traffickers bankroll local and state and even federal institutions to make sure that they can still continue trafficking?
It's a lot harder to bankroll a federal institution. That's why I'm saying bring the federal government into it, because on local and state institutions, there's much less institutional checks. On the federal level, there's a lot of checks internal to the department.
How is that going to just be targeted towards Sacramento? That'll be.
It's supposed to be targeted to every city. It's a problem in every city.
Okay, why can't they just decrease the amount of regulation?
Thank you, Senator Karp. Excuse me, Ms. Mayor. Sorry, Mayor.
Hi, Representative Jawar. So as
Hello.
you mentioned in your speech, there's currently a lack of a database to be able to funnel this, right? But what happens when you actually create this database? Doesn't that only push victims and these traffickers underground?
No, it doesn't. So here's the thing, right? When we create this database, we make it possible for the federal government to look into what areas are worst affected. That means that even if they try to go underground in those areas, the federal government knows what the areas are in the first place. We can also crack down on the underground database.
I understand that, but it's only going to create more incentive for them to hide their business.
Senator Pontes.
Hi, Representative. So what specifically would a national database add to the sex offender registry we already have in different regions?
So the sex offender registry doesn't have any federal guides on supporting victims. It doesn't record data on what locations are hotspots. It doesn't record data on who's
I understand that, but
where.
it does have data about who's a sex offender, and if regions know how many are in separate regions, and the Department of Justice just
being a sex offender and being a human trafficker are actually like completely different crimes in many cases. So based
but you have a lot of overlap in regards to the crime and the people that are
but in the cases where there's not overlap, victims suffer.
I'm Mr. Jawar. So upon you telling me that we had no national database, I did a quick Google search and it came up that we do have one called the Human Trafficking Reporting System. So what makes your solution better than our current one, if it already exists?
The human trafficking reporting system is severely underfunded and doesn't actually have essentially the executive and the federal overreach to ensure that like we can look over the entire country.
Right. So why would you propose creating a completely new system when we already have one if we can just take it over and better fund it?
Because this new system would be radically different in terms of its goals and making sure that the entire country is represented.
Thank you, Senator Jawar. You may be seated. All speakers, please rise. Senator Ivey, you have the floor.
I think the chair, again, I'm not in grid view. So Harley, if you could just let me know when my judges are ready, that'd be great.
Okay. Good to go.
Thank you. On January 18th, 2015, on the Stanford University campus, Brock Turner sexually assaulted 22-year-old Chanel Miller while she was unconscious. What separates Brock from the rest of the rapists is that he got away with it. He was found guilty, but only sentenced to 6 months in prison, of which he only served 3. Hundreds of thousands of cases like Chanel's go either underpunished or over-enforced. We changed that by giving victims their voice and allowing the victims or their immediate families the final say when it comes to sentencing. So first, we'll talk about what happens when the victims get the final say and how it would be implemented. And second, we'll see how in real life situations, how this can better improve our criminal justice system and allow for the victim's guilt to completely disappear from the status quo. So first, I turn to Marcus Dubber of the University of New York when he says that victims are precluded from recommending a specific sentence in sentencing hearing and across the duration of the trial, even in capital cases. So, in a capital case, when the death penalty is very much on the table, even if the victim or their immediate family does not want the death penalty to be considered, it still will be, and the judge and the jury may impose that death penalty, which leads to victims' guilt. This means that when the victims or their families, in cases where the victim is deceased, these cases can often lead to mental distress, because they see that they were responsible for the death of another person for pressing charges. And that in the status quo needs to end, because after the trial begins, the pain for the victims should completely disappear. And in the status quo, when victims' guilt is still very prevalent, that simply does not happen. Now back to Marcus Dubber. He says that the victim's perspective is extremely important in trials. And we have to realize that when given the choice to decide sentencing, the victims are often more lenient and tend to stray away from the death penalty because of the guilt that I mentioned earlier. Now let's talk about how that would be implemented actually in a courtroom. Now, many people, when they think of the idea of victims deciding the punishment, consider barbaric or unethical punishments, but in reality, that's simply not true. The way it would be implemented is the judge or jury or sentencing jury would set a legal limit, a spectrum for the punishment to be decided, a list of options. And then the victim or their immediate family would then decide whether or not the maximum punishment would be inflicted or a more lenient sentence would be imposed. And so this ability of the victims expressing their choices and their desires in the courtroom is what's going to make our system fair. by not allowing rapists to walk free after 6 months. Realize that victims should be the center of these court cases, and it's time that we gave them the voice. Thank you.
Speech time of 3 minutes and 7 seconds. All questioners, please rise. We'll start with. Bear with me. Jawar.
Hi, Senator. Would you only allow victims to have a say when the death penalty is one of the options?
No, merely I said that it is most important that they have the option when the capital case is considered, but I think that on most, especially...
What is the purpose?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
What is the purpose of imprisonment?
Imprisonment, in most countries, it's for reformation, but in our country, we can see that with recidivism on the rise, the prison
also to keep criminals off of the streets, right? At that point, if the victim can decide, how do we know the criminals can be off the streets for long enough?
Hi, Senator. So would you agree that in a lot of capital cases, there's things like murder being involved? So the victim's family would be the one that would be able to decide the punishment in this case, correct?
Exactly, yeah. That's why I was saying the victim's immediate family.
Right. So the victim's immediate family has a lot of emotional connections to the victim. You would agree with that, right? So in a lot of cases, they might pursue more excessive alternatives. Where do you draw the line between these alternatives that you say you're going to create this system?
No, exactly. It's not me. Like I said, it's the judge and the sentencing jury that are going to lay down the spectrum. And
okay, so
normally,
what does the spectrum look like? I'm confused about what you mean by that.
In the criminal justice system,
Senator, how does rape emotionally affect the victim?
It can often be devastating for years.
It can be devastating. So how does putting a devastated, emotionally affected person in charge of an entire criminal sentence fare in any way? Isn't it better just to take their opinion and their perspective?
The word that you used, entire, is completely misused. The judge and sentencing jury are laying the spectrum. Often, in that case, the judge and sentencing jury...
Okay, they're laying a spectrum, but isn't it better to just have input from what they want and then have judges and jurors have the final say?
Hi, so you stress the impact of victim's guilt, but how often is the death penalty actually imposed?
Often in southern states, we can see that it's called the death belt because the death penalty is imposed many times per year. And we can see that that devastates the victims and their families.
Since 1976, though, only 1,499 people have had the death penalty. Is that a significant number of sentencings?
So we have to realize that one sentencing can change one person's life forever. So every sentence can affect a victim and their entire family for years to come.
Thank you, Senator Ivey. All speakers, please rise. Senator Karp.
I thank the chair. That's Senator Karp, K-A-R-P. Any indication when you're ready, I would be happy to begin. So just give me a thumbs up. Just checking all my judges. Okay, perfect. The Big Apple is known to be home to one of the best public school systems in the world. But when the racial disparities continue to manifest themselves across the entire system, this apple is only rotten to the core. In my hometown of New York City, the high school process works in a much different way than other public school systems. Students take one test that determines if they earn a spot at one of the 8 specialized high schools, known across the nation as gateways to success through opportunities and connections to top universities. But this test feeds segregation into these schools, not talent. While using a test to determine placement may seem unbiased because it's only based on a score, low-income students are already at a disadvantage from the moment they walk into the room, or from the moment they don't. Students that come from high-poverty schools lack the resources to prepare well for this test, and often aren't even aware they have the opportunity to take it in the first place. The Washington Post reports in March of 2019, out of the 895 seats offered at Stuyvesant, the most selective high school, only 7 went to Black students. Not 7%, but 7 students. And Eliza Shapiro of the New York Times in 2019 furthers this by saying, even though Black and Hispanic students make up nearly 70% of New York City's public school system, They only make up 10% of students admitted into these specialized high schools. But here's the difference. At schools with high income students, students are encouraged to invest in tutoring companies that can help better their chances of getting into these schools. Starting as early as 6th grade, families spent hundreds or thousands of dollars on tutors and classes. So while the test may not be biased, it highlights the educational discrimination and the lack of opportunities low-income students have consistently faced. The only option left for these low-income students is to go to their zoned public schools, but these schools lack the proper funding to enable their students to succeed. In the past, New York City has tried to solve the problem with the Fair Student Funding Program, which was supposed to allocate money towards poorer schools. But Chalkbeat reports in 2018 that only 23% of city schools received funding at or above the level they were promised. And even if they did, it was completely disproportionate. Schools that had twice as many low-income students received just 15% more funding. By fully funding this act, we can start allocating money towards the highest need, elementary, middle, and high schools, allowing us to provide students with the resources they need to succeed, not just on the test, but in their future. The New York Times found in 2016, when states send additional funds to their low-income districts, they see more academic improvement. By funding this act, we target the root cause of this problem. We close the education gap between low-income students and those at specialized schools by creating a system where everyone can receive an equally high-quality education. Thank you.
Speech time of 3 minutes exactly. All questioners, please rise. We'll start with Parthabon and then Khan.
So how do you know our schools are choosing students off of a bias? Like, aren't those admission processes like really opaque?
So, okay, what I talked about in my speech was that the test, it just ranks people based off their score. But the problem is students who come from low poverty areas, high poverty areas don't have the resources that other students have.
Well, let's say in the case that they're able to take it and the amount of demographic in the school is much less. How do you know that the people being accepted is off of a bias?
It's not off of a bias. The problem is that kids aren't prepared in the same way, which makes things extremely unfair.
Senator Khan.
Hi, so you tell me 23% of schools are funded properly under this act we have right now. What's the reason for that?
Okay, so the reason is this funding doesn't have the amount that they can give to all the schools that they promised. So it can't designate all the money that they said it would.
But you told me that they had a budget, but they were only able to fund that budget by about a quarter. What changes when we pass what you asked for? Because
Right. So when this budget was passed, it was at the same time as a lot of schools were decreasing the budget and teacher salaries were raising. So things became very unbalanced.
Senator Kaiser.
Okay, so most public school matters are handled by state legislatures, right? But who allocates the funding for like Title I and Title IV schools?
The federal government, right?
Okay, yes. And when we allocate that money, don't we focus it on like less fortunate districts with less fortunate populations?
Okay, so that's what we've been trying to do, but the problem is we haven't been giving enough money, and a lot of the funding for New York City schools comes from this specific program, and we're not giving enough money to that program.
Most programs make it so students don't have to spend money on tutoring and they get the high quality education right next to their backyards?
Thank you, Senator Ivey.
That's not true at all.
Seeing as how New York has been disproportionately affected by recent events, including the virus and other market shifts, is now the right time to start messing with school budgets?
I think it's completely the right time because when kids are learning from home, high income students are already going to have that advanced thing because they have more technology and they are in a better area. So if we give more money to low income students, that can benefit them learning from home.
Does New York even have the money, let alone the federal government?
Okay, what I'm saying is that we need to get this money because right now we're in a time of crisis, which means that we can give as much money as necessary.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Karp. You may be seated.
I thank the chair.
All speakers, please rise. Senator Earlbeck.
Just a signal from my judges in Parley when you're ready. Just a thumbs up. For years, women have been caged with stereotypes and a lack of economic opportunity, clipping their wings. But this is especially predominant in the Northern Triangle. It's because today we could take steps to let the women free in this region. So first, let's start by understanding the issue growing across the globe while we sat idly, and that is the lack of opportunity that exists in the Northern Triangle. The Northern Triangle consists of 3 major countries, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, which are the most violent countries in the world. That's because gang violence runs rampant, fueled by poverty. But other than their economic problems, there's a deeper one, a cultural issue unaddressed by simply giving aid to the region, and that is caudillismo, or male-dominant culture, which basically means no economic opportunity for women who have to obey the heads of households stuck in a draconian past. But that's because, according to the International Labor Office in 2011, women are disadvantaged in access to credit and financial services because commercial banks focus on men and formal businesses, neglecting women. In nearly every aspect of life in the Northern Triangle, women have no way to escape. They have to resort to fleeing to bordering countries or face lives without the ability to make change necessary to thrive. That's because they don't get credit or investment for businesses to start them. But understand, they're even worse when they're stuck in their households and their neighborhoods because the burden of violence weighs them down. According to UNHCR in 2018, 62% of women reported being confronted with dead bodies in neighborhoods. But this should come at no surprise when, according to CFR in June of 2018, gang-related violence brought the homicide rate there to 103% per 100,000 citizens. Danger knocks on every door in the Northern Triangle, but sooner or later, there is nowhere to hide. Women and children are being forced into gangs. But what can we do? Well, we can take action and provide resources necessary for change, and that comes in the form of microloans. We can give incentives with investments which aren't handouts. That's because women in the Northern Triangle need to be given a chance, and they haven't been in the past. According to Hussein Samad from the World Bank Research Group in April of 2013, the result in micro-borrowing household incomes increase. They increase the consumption in the area where they live, and they decrease overall poverty. Understand that right now, when we give these women a chance at life and we give them the chance to start their own businesses, overall poverty actually decreases in the area. But understand, not only will the women thrive from these benefits, their children will too. According to the International Labor Office in 2011, children of microfinance borrowers increase their livelihood with full-time enrollment and decrease dropout rates. In the end, micro borrowers create a pattern of security for their families, helping children otherwise forced to join gangs to provide for their families, literally trading guns for a genuine education. In the future, we could bring hope to the Northern Triangle as a whole. In the past, we need to actually act on it. In the past, we've done nothing to help these women, but we could break cultural barriers and free themselves from their chains of economic opportunity, because when caudillismo is present, they have no choice. Now we're giving them many.
Speech time of 3 minutes and 4 seconds. All questioners, please rise. We'll start with Parthiban.
So what incentive is there to stop joining gangs if it fuels their entire economy and their jobs?
Well, because when you give microloans to these women, you're helping them, their children and these women not have to join gangs because they have another economic incentive.
Either join a gang or killed on the spot because gangs can't trust those citizens, then what are you going to do to create a bigger incentive to somehow stop joining gangs?
The problem is that these women have no way to get the credit necessary to start businesses. That's why they join gangs. They can't start businesses or have any other option, but now they do.
Thank you, Patterson.
Hello, Senator. So how exactly are these loans going to work?
Microloans. Okay, so the American government provides like a set amount of money that they'll give based on their investment in the project that they want to have. And then we'll give an interest rate in order so that we have some of the profit and they have an incentive to pay us back in the future once they make enough money.
All right. So have these countries like mismanaged these loans in the past?
Not very often. We're actually giving it to the women, not the country themselves.
So how is it going to be administered? Who's administering?
We can create an administration ourselves, an oversight.
Thank you, Mayor.
Representative Earlbeck, so I entirely agree with you that the gang violence in the Northern Triangle is abysmal. But what happened the last time the U.S. tried to lend microloans in India?
Microloans in India were actually effective in some areas, yes.
No, they actually, on net, were entirely ineffective. That's because they saddled women with debt that they simply couldn't repay and ended up leading to suicides across the nation.
That's because the rates were way too high. When we decrease the rates, we know that these women can actually pay it back, and we can give incentives to check in on that.
If you decrease the rate, then they really aren't getting any economic impact, right?
Yes, they are. I disagree.
Senator Kaiser, thank you.
Hi, Representative. So one of the main problems in the Northern Triangle is that employers don't want to hire women, right?
Sure.
But how does your program actually incentivize them to do so?
Well, because you're giving the women the ability to start their own businesses. They won't have to be hired and they can hire other women in the process.
Okay, but statistically, how many women are going to choose to start their own businesses, which is a risky venture, putting them in more debt as opposed to just getting a job?
Many women. Women don't have access to the credit they need to start their businesses. Now they're given the option.
Is there any data to support that?
Yes, there is. I can send it to you.
Thank you, Senator Earlbeck. You may be seated. All speakers, please rise. Senator Kaiser. Senator Kaiser.
I thank the chair. Hi, everyone. That's Representative Kaiser, spelled K-A-I-S-E-R. Once again, K-A-I-S-E-R. Judges, just give me a thumbs up when you guys are ready. Good, good, good. All right, thank you so much. Growing up with my eyes glued to a TV screen, I began to pick up on a couple of the recurring themes on the news, the most prominent of which was that we had to stop using fossil fuels and start using renewable energy. But even as a 7-year-old, I realized that nothing was getting done. Sorry, Representative Khan. But now I say that we need to change our approach to this problem. Let's target it in a different manner. Let's shift the conversation from what type of energy we're using to how much energy we're using. Because the more lamps we plug in, the more responsibility we take on, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. But first, let's stop wasting energy and get right to the problem. Too much energy is being wasted. As the Washington State University explains, in 2017, Americans constitute 5% of the world's population, but consume 24% of the world's energy. Let's hit pause really quickly and understand how that occurs on an individual basis. The World Economic Forum writes in April of 2019 that inefficient use accounts for 68% of the energy Americans consume, meaning that 2/3 of the energy we burn isn't actually necessary. And this accounts for all things, like leaving the lights on or keeping coffee makers plugged in when we're not using them. And thanks to our excessive electricity use, we have hit fast forward on all negative impacts. The New York Times tells us in November of 2017 that in commercial buildings alone, where annual electricity costs are roughly $190 billion, about 30% of this energy goes to waste. That's $57 billion. In these trying times, Americans need that money. It can't be wasted on electricity we're not using. But further, let's zoom out of our day-to-day lives and look at the big picture harms. The Atlantic tells us in August of 2017 that excess energy usage always causes negative effects, whether it be from our carbon footprint with fossil fuels or flooding with renewable energy. No matter the type of energy being used, if we use too much of it, there's always a downside. If we don't unplug soon, catastrophic effects are going to be seen in both the short and long term. But the best part is that we can solve this problem with the flick of a switch, literally. Programs like Energy Star, which are used on a federal level, identify and clearly label the most efficient products on the market, and that needs to be expanded. As congressmen, we need to pass policy that either subsidizes those programs or offers higher tax incentives to people using energy-efficient products. But this doesn't only happen on a national basis, as we can also spark change on an individual level. For example, I am working with the members of my community to reduce the amount of energy wasted by implementing motion sensor lights in every home being built. But further, it's unplugging the coffee maker, turning off the TV, and shutting off the lights that really makes an electrifying difference. When we press rewind, it's easy to see that electricity is good for all of us. But if we don't turn off our lights soon, it'll be lights out for all of us.
Thank you, Senator, for a speech of 3 minutes and 4 seconds. All questioners, please rise. First will be Khan.
Hi, Representative. So you tell me that too much energy is being wasted, things like keeping your lights on too long. How does that correlate to generating less energy? Won't the same fraction of energy be wasted?
Okay, not necessarily, because when we reduce energy on an individual basis, like when we reduce the usage, that actually allows for us to produce more energy without.
So I completely agree. Like we should have efforts and like a lot of information being spread on how energy wasted is bad. But why does that mean we should be generating less energy?
Okay, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if we begin to use less energy as on an individual basis, we can focus about other energy problems.
Senator Ivey.
Seeing as that we have a growing population and further urbanizing environment, can we really count on all of these people using less instead of making them move to renewable?
Okay, that's the thing. Renewable energy is actually going to cost more for these people as opposed to using products that either we subsidize or that are already energy efficient.
But regardless of consumer prices, is it reasonable to assume that we can prevent the environmental change
It's a much
by
smaller
reducing?
transition to an energy efficient product than to a solar panel.
Senator Patterson.
All right, so what legislation or program can we possibly implement to try and stop people from wasting energy?
Well, as I said in my speech, we could 1, subsidize Energy Star products, which are energy efficient, or 2, offer higher tax incentives for people who use energy efficient products.
All right, so how is that going to be quantified? How are they going to prove that they are saving energy by using energy efficient products?
Okay, well, in the status quo, people who buy Energy Star products can just put it on their tax form that they're using Energy Star products, and then we can offer them higher tax incentives.
Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jawar.
Hi, Senator. So you said it's much cheaper to buy an Energy Star product that we subsidize than it is to buy a solar panel, right?
Yeah, if
So
we
why don't
subsidize it further, it would be cheaper.
So why don't we subsidize the solar panel?
Well, we are already doing that, but for what I'm
So
saying is
why wouldn't we
energy
just
efficient
continuously
products
push
are
money
much
towards
smaller
that?
and more efficient for people to switch to as opposed to a large solar panel.
So why wouldn't we continuously push money towards that, drop costs even more, and then have renewable energy that people can use in an unlimited
We're
amount?
already subsidizing renewable energy in the status quo, and it's not working as well as we thought.
So why not continue?
Thank you, Senator Kaiser. And then all speakers rise. Senator Gupta, last but not least.
All right. For the judge's reference, that's Senator Gupta Medichetti. I don't know how I'm listed on tab room, but I don't have gallery view on. So if I could get some confirmation when the judges are ready, I'll start. From our East Coast harbor for centuries, the statue of... Oh, my bad.
All right, now you're good. My apologies.
All right. From our East Coast harbor for centuries, the Statue of Liberty has welcomed prospecting immigrants and those looking for a home. It states, and I quote, "Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me." But it seems today we have abandoned that idealized notion, specifically in my home city on the opposite side of that country on the East Coast, the city of San Francisco. As CNN quantifies for us on December 30th of 2018, the amount of people living on the streets of San Francisco has increased by 14% to a grand total of 8,011 people. And that number is what exists in the status quo pre-corona. We don't understand how the wake of the pandemic has changed that and has likely exacerbated it. The California state government and the federal government have long abandoned SF's homeless population with ineffective policies, necessitating better action. But let's jump into the actual problem in the status quo. The National Low-Income Housing Coalition tells us in 2019 that the housing crisis means that affording a 2-bedroom apartment in San Francisco requires making an absurd salary of $61 per hour for a single earner, or 215 weekly working hours with San Francisco's already high minimum wage of $15 per hour. But let's understand how this absurd cost of living exacerbates the homeless crisis, thereby leading to problems in government. As the SF budget and legislative analyst tells us in June 13 of 2016, the limited number of housing placement options available from the city, and the city not choosing the most optimal solution, has wasted critical resources, leading to the SF Chronicle telling us that 48% of temporary housing units' residents' health has been negatively impacted, and 15% have experienced exposure to bed bugs, mold, rats, lead exposure, and blood and human blood in the bathrooms. Let's understand the problem of homelessness in SF both exacerbates the city's cost and, more importantly, negative impacts their own health, even when the city gives them help. The city of San Francisco isn't equipped to deal with these problems, which is why we need to be looking towards federal assistance, specifically in expanding the Homeward Bound program. The SF Chronicle tells us on July 29 of 2019 what this is. This is a city-funded bus ticket out of San Francisco to an area with access to more resources that connects them with permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing, a federal rental assistance program. And as a testament to its efficacy, the CA Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing tells us in March of 2019 that 56% of residents are stably housed with jobs, and it has helped a total of 11,000 people between 2013 to 2018. To further testify this, the San Francisco city government tells us in June of 2019 this is the most cost-effective option, as it costs only $270 per person. Let's understand, in the status quo, coronavirus is going to exacerbate the homelessness crisis in San Francisco, and the best way to help this is allowing the federal government to expand on the Homeward Bound program, which has already had a history of success in San Francisco. Thank you.
Speech time of 3 minutes and 8 seconds. All questioners, please rise. We'll start with Parthiban.
Okay. Hi, Senator. Won't the coronavirus aid fund, almost $150 billion just given by the government, actually increase healthcare accessibility and increase the amount of accessibility to homes now?
Let's understand a couple of things. First, this isn't targeted towards the homeless population, which needs the most help. And second, especially because California is a hotspot for the coronavirus already, the funding isn't going to be enough.
Why would it not be enough if we're literally giving it to the most affected regions in the country?
Right, we are, but California already has a huge amount of cases. First,
Hi,
it
so
added
what does the
1,000 just
Homeward
yesterday.
Bound? Hi, so what does the Homeward Bound program provide the people who use it with?
Okay, so what it gives them is a bus ticket outside and help outside into areas that have the support necessary to help them.
Right, but if they're going into areas with, let's say, lower minimum wages and not as many resources as they had before, how is this going to help, and how will it be implemented in other cities?
Well, see, that's the problem. I'm specifically targeting San Francisco, but this exists outside in the US too, because some cities are more equipped to deal with the homeless population than others. Homeward Bound programs target those areas and allow for them to move into areas with more resources.
Representative Gupta, so have there been any instances of the Homeward Bound program being abused?
I don't know, but if there are, that's still outweighed by the fact that it helps more people.
No,
I'm
it's
allowing
because
legislation to be abused by one.
Representative Gupta, all across Salt Lake City, thousands of homeless people have gone missing, not by their own will, simply because the Homeward Bound program has given them a bus ticket and dumped them in the middle of nowhere. And in the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta, the same thing was used as a form of gentrification. How can you advocate for such a system with so little oversight?
Right, because you point out specific examples where it's failed. I present to you an example where it succeeded. As congressmen, we can pass better legislation.
Are there people who are working in San Francisco and struggle to pay rent or afford a house?
Absolutely.
Okay, how does Homeward Bound treat them when it forces them to leave their job and move to a whole new city?
It doesn't force anybody. Homeward Bound is always an option that an individual can take.
Okay, so
it
how does
isn't
it
a forced program.
How does it help them?
If the city of San Francisco doesn't have the resources to provide for someone and they're on the streets and they choose they would like to use the Homeward Bound program, they can move to an area where they get housing and assistance.
Why doesn't the federal government step in with public housing and help the city of San Francisco?
Because we've tried public housing in the city of San Francisco. It exists today, but it isn't working.
Thank you, Senator Gupta. Just in case I missed anything, are there any speakers remaining? Okay. Wonderful. So that does conclude the, yeah, Mr. Ivy?
I was going to motion to recess until next session.
Oh, in a moment. So this does conclude the morning hour session. I thank you all for sharing with us. Barring any questions, I will entertain a motion for to adjourn for recess until the next session. Mr. Ivy?
Yeah, a motion to recess until start of next session.
All in favor, hold up your placard. Assuming you know consent. So ordered. As far as I know, we're good to all leave and reconvene, and a round of applause virtually for our judges for taking the time to judge for us today. So thank you to both of you. Thank you to you all. Thank you to our observers. And I think we were on the live stream, which is always fun. And so congratulations on a great session. I'll see you all this afternoon. And judges, it was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. Great job. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you, Ms. France.
Thank you. Good job.